Thank you, Mark, and a big hello from London. Some interesting weekly patterns from last week that have run on into this week, or in some cases have not run on into this week. I'll start with the commodities this time, and in energy we had weekly key reversals up last week in the futures in the US on NYMEX WTI crude oil, heating oil, and over in Europe in ICE Brent crude oil, plus the Brent gas oil spread as well. Interestingly, this week we had attempted follow-on higher moves early on this week in both WTI crude oil and Brent crude oil, but these faded fast, though prices are still close to the Friday closes, and thus the top end from last week. In heating oil, the picture was better, with a strong move higher on the Monday, with a daily key reversal up, and yesterday a new high that came close to challenging the high for this year, and indeed was the second highest high since April 2024. So overall, a nice follow-on higher. In the Brent gas oil spread, well, we started from a lower level than last Friday, but have since moved higher than last week, and we are at the highest high since late November last year. In ICE Dutch TTF gas baseload futures, we had a weekly key reversal down last week, a somewhat unusual one, as last Friday's close was around midway for the whole week's range. This week, well, we have had some good moves lower, so we have had a follow-on from last week's action, but we have not managed as yet to push down below last week's low, deciding instead to maintain prices within last week's range, which is a little disappointing and potentially disconcerting. For guidance, the ICE UK NBP natural gas future, for which I would look for confirmation on any such move, did not manage a full key reversal down last week, opting instead to form a lesser outside week pattern. However, this also has seen a similar move lower this week, though as I say, still within last week's range. Over now to Paris Rapeseed futures, which had a weekly key reversal up last week. This week we have seen an attempted follow-on higher, which has managed to move higher than last week's close and even higher than last week's range, but has not stabilized over the latter. It seems right now that the gold long moving average, currently at 474 3/4, is capping the market, as it has done more or less successfully since roughly this time last year. However, the market has some concentrated and really interesting support from 468 3/4 down to about 464 1/4. That range in between the support below and the resistance above is narrowing, but I suspect it may take far longer than the patience of many involved in this market when they're looking for a definitive move. We shall see. I cover this more fully in my oilseeds and veg oils commentary. Next is ICE UK feed wheat futures in London. Now my chart is a less active one, but it does show a weekly key reversal up last week, though it's within a quite old congestion zone between 161.95 to 165 3/4, dating from March to April 2019. We have had an attempt higher this week, but prices have not managed to push up and out of this congestion. Interestingly, this weekly key reversal up last week comes after a failed weekly key reversal down seen in mid-January. However, the very big patterns here and the related key levels to watch out for are the necklines for the August 2020 to date head and shoulders pattern and the May 2023 to date cat's ears pattern. Yes, there is a pattern called the cat's ears. They share a common neckline, which you can see on my daily chart highlighted in purple, and it runs through at 168.80 today, a short distance above the market. To round off the commodities, we had a weekly key reversal up last week in EEX butter futures, if only just. This market lacks activity this week, and we have neither seen a follow-on higher nor a countering move lower. Over to the financials, and we had a weekly key reversal up in the German DAX30 stock index futures last week. We did not have any confirming moves high in any of the other stock or stock indexes I follow, so this one was very much on its own. And this week Well, this week we have not seen a follow-on higher, with prices instead, whilst not turning fully back down, have moved lower than Friday's close, if still within last week's range. There is a strong question mark over this pattern. Finally, in the currencies, we had weekly key reversals up in US dollar Egyptian pound, 1 month NDF, in US dollar Colombian peso, and in euro against the Polish zloty. So, no weekly patterns in any of the major currency pairs. This week we have seen an excellent follow-on higher move in the dollar against the Egyptian pound NDF, an attempt to try higher in the US dollar Colombian peso, with prices milling around the high close seen last Friday, and not as yet falling back down. And in euro Polish zloty, well, nothing much, as prices mill around last Friday's relatively high close, though with a limited attempt higher today. As always, I'm happy to answer any direct questions with anyone who's interested, and with that I'll finish this section from London, and I hope that you found these comments useful.
Thank you for watching and listening. This weekly broadcast gives the essential market patterns and consequences. Please be aware of the risk disclaimer posted both at the front and at the back of this broadcast. Copyright is Eddie Tofpick and ADM Investor Services International Limited. And here comes the final important bit.